Hey guys, what's up? It is week 376. Have a handful of reviews for you and a very short, quick update. Let's hop right into the reviews. The first one up is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. from Arrow Video. This is the 4K. Now, this is actually, of course, a take on the old television show with Robert Vaughn and David McCallum. And I must admit, that show was not on. There wasn't really reruns of Man from U.N.C.L.E. when I was young. You know, there's Gilligan's Island, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, all that stuff. And so I'm familiar with those kind of shows, but Man from U.N.C.L.E. wasn't a show that played too much. Guy Ritchie is the director. Guy Ritchie, of course, made Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, which is a pretty popular film. I've covered it on the channel. Very fun, good, great cast. So he's known for kind of making gangster films. So this is kind of an oddball one for him to do. He later would do the Sherlock Holmes movies, which fits more in line with something Man from U.N.C.L.E., I would say. Now, I've had said this before. I'm not the biggest fan of spy films. The 60s stuff. And that's more like, I think, like you get that weird 60s psychedelic, which can be really cool at times, but then it can be very hokey and weird and bizarre, which is going to happen when I talk about another film this week. But so we get that, and then we add in the element of the spy, and it's just all these bizarre kind of weird gadgets. So this was originally made by Ian Fleming. The old show is what they say in the special features, who is very, very prevalent in the Bond stuff and all these kind of spy things and everything like that. Very, very popular amongst that subgenre. So yeah, this film right here stars Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer as the two characters that are in Man from U.N.C.L.E. Also, Hugh Grant is in here, very good role. And the other actors and actresses I'm not too familiar with in this one. I'm sure these people that you see probably seen dozens of times, and you're like, and you don't remember them until it finally clicks in your head. This plot is, of course, there is some nuclear stuff going on during Cold War era. And, this was during the Berlin Wall kind of time. I've seen a lot of movies, in the last 10, 15 years that involved the Berlin Wall. I think it's a great backdrop for films. Possession is one. Suspiria remake had it as well. It's a very kind of crazy period in world history, and I kind of like when they code it in there in films, especially spy films, because how could you not have it in there? So there's two people, a Russian spy played by Armie Hammer, and American spy played by Henry Cavill as Napoleon Solo. And I like that name. Napoleon, the name right there, obviously, the French person. But to me, when they add that name as a character in the Dirty Dozen book, Jefferson, who was played by Jim Brown in the film, was actually named Napoleon White. And he was a really good character in that book, so that name always stuck with me as a really great character name. So what happens is these bad guys are trying to recreate a nuclear warhead or create a nuclear warhead and have all the secrets and whatnot. So they kidnapped basically this kind of nuclear physicist what is the word I'm looking for? Nuclear fission kind of guy who makes all these shit. I don't know the scientific terms for making nuclear warheads and all that shit. But I am not. I am a guy who works at a factory who talks about movies for fun and used to make them and act in them. But yeah, that's just, so my credentials on nuclear warheads are not too up there. And probably this movie's a little bit goofy in that kind of aspect as well. So the Americans after it, the Russians after it, and they're making it in kind of East Germany and stuff like that. Yeah, be over on the Russian side, and they need to contact a woman whose father, the daughter of this nuclear warhead guy, to find out where he is. She says she doesn't know, but the American gets to her, the Russian chases her. They're obviously trying to kill each other, and then kind of when they settle down, they realize that these two, the Russian and the American, have to work together. Kind of weird, kind of I'm familiar, with another 48 hours. Those kind of two characters have to work together that don't necessarily like each other, but end up forming this bond. Very buddy kind of deal like that. That formula never gets old. It's very entertaining. Yin and yang, whatever, they polar opposites. So what ensues is a lot of fun action, some really good dialogue. It's not overly violent or gratuitous. Obviously, being from a 60s show, it's going to placate to that audience a little bit. But from my understanding, it's not exactly in that same vein. Henry Cavill's no Robert Vaughn, and Armie Hammer is no David McCallum. And Armie Hammer and Henry Cavill have good chemistry. They're very entertaining. They're very funny. Hugh Grant is kind of the guy who's running the Man from U.N.C.L.E. program, and that's the program. The name, the U.N.C.L.E. is one of those abbreviated terms, But he's great in it. It's not a super huge role. The bad guys are fun in it, and the way that one of the bad guys' demise is almost, I don't want to say it's anticlimactic because people like that's an insult, but I thought it was interesting that they did it that way. I thought it was kind of they used their brawn throughout the entire film, so now they're going to use a little bit of their intelligence and whatnot. This is a fun film. It looks really good on 4K. It sounds good. They do some needle drops that work really well. There's the right amount of comedy. This is kind of your standard blockbuster. That's probably a little better than it should be. I would directly compare this to something like the Wonder Woman film that came out, the first one from DC that has that kind of fish out of water, kind of fun spy kind of stuff. And like I said, I'm not the biggest spy fan, but I did enjoy more of the more modern ones like Kingsman and Wonder Woman that have that kind of espionage angle. And Man from U.N.C.L.E. I enjoyed as well. It's not my hugest forte, the Bond stuff. It's not that I dislike James Bond, it's just I'm not as familiar with James Bond as I should be. I've seen a handful of his stuff, not all that many movies. So like when it comes to like the spy films of the 60s, it's not my favorite subgenre, to be honest. But this one I enjoyed. Man from U.N.C.L.E. It looks good on 4K, it sounds good. Henry Cavill's a solid leading man, of course, and Armie Hammer, he had that weird, obviously, that thing where he basically is done. He's canceled now, but he was always solid. When I saw him, he was in Free Fire and this, and he was in that horror film Wounds, which not a great film, I don't think, but his performance is pretty unique in it. Just kind of big guy. A lot of the leading men they say are very short. Not so much about Armie Hammer. He's a very big guy. There's a lot of jokes in there about it. There's a really good scene where this Nazi kind of explains his, you don't know he's a Nazi, and explains what he did during the war. And he's basically said, I had open field to perform these tortures on people. And that reminds me straight out of the old 80s action films where Bruce Willis or Mel Gibson's getting tortured and they break out. And they kind of play on that, and True Lies as well with Arnold when they go to torture him. And I always kind of fun, character type, the evil kind of torturous Nazi guy getting his just desserts in here. Yeah, but this is a fun movie. It looks really good on 4K. Solid movie. It's not, like I said, this is not my favorite subgenre, of course, you know what I mean, but I enjoyed it. Not as good as the Kingsman, I would say, but probably on the level of something like a Wonder Woman, the first one. So yeah, check this out, Man from U.N.C.L.E. And I don't think it made that much money. Oh, I should talk about the special features, of course. Duh, Dave. So we have Dolby Atmos, so it sounded great. Brand new commentary by critics Brian Reisman and Max Irvy. The Hollywood Way, brand new interview with co-writer-producer Lionel Wingram. A Lineage of Bad Guys, brand new interview with actor Luca Calvani. Legacy of U.N.C.L.E, brand new featurette celebrating the original 1960 TV series and its influence on the 2015 movie featuring Helen McCarthy, David Flint, and Vic Pratt. These are all super fans that know the subgenre very well. It's good stuff. Cockneys and Robbers, brand new featurette exploring director Guy Ritchie's Oeuvre. Featuring Kat Hughes, Hannah Strong, and Josh Sacco. That's really cool because they're talking about his career and why he got into this movie, all that kind of stuff like that, from his trajectory from Lock, Stock, 2 Smoking Barrels, how that almost made him an overnight sensation with actors willing to work with him. Then we have Spy Vision, recreating 60s cool, higher class of hero. Matisse Motorcycles, proper and very British, the guys from U.N.C.L.E, and a man of extraordinary talents. 5 archival featurettes exploring the making of the film. U.N.C.L.E on-set spy. 4 archival bite-sized featurettes going behind the scenes in the film. Trailer, gallery, double-sided fold-out poster, all that kind of stuff there. So yeah, check this one out. I think that people will enjoy it if you missed it. I think it's well worth your time if you want to check it out. Okay, the next one here is Red Line 7000, and this is a racing film from 1965, directed by legendary director Howard Hawks. Of course, Real Bravo is the one that comes to me, and he produced the Thing from Another World. So this stars James Caan. That's the big name in here, and Mariana Hill. Those are the two ones I think that most people will know right off the top of their heads. Mariana Hill was in one of my favorite horror films, The Messiah of Evil. She's in a handful of other ones too, and James Caan is in everything from The Godfather to Misery. He's an excellent actor, and this is his first starring role. Howard Hawks is one of these directors. This is kind of late in his career, so this is a bizarre one. It takes place, it's directed and made in the mid-60s. So I didn't really know what to expect from this kind of big racing film. In reality, we follow 3 characters. We follow 3 sets of characters, kind of. We follow 3 kind of females and 3 males and the relationships amongst each other and the kind of back politics among, racing and everything like that. So there's the guy who runs the kind of whole joint. James Caan is his best racer, Mike Marsh, and then he has this new guy who's coming into town from Italy, and he brings this beautiful girl, Mariana Hill, with him, and he's going to race for him. And we have this new upcomer who basically wants to prove himself at any cost necessary. and he starts dating the guy who's running this place's sister. So that complicates things and everything like that. We also have a nightclub singer who works at this bar that all the kind of racers frequent, and she thinks she's cursed. So this is a subplot here where she thinks she's cursed. She's dated race car drivers, and a couple of them have died, so she thinks it's her fault that she thinks she carries this curse. Of course, someone's going to fall in love with her. Someone's going to, go back to the boss's. It's all this complicated stuff here. Now, it is kind of strange. Like, the female characters come across all pretty well. The male characters, they should just call this, like, females having to deal with, like, fragile masculinity and just really, like, bruised egos on guys and everything like that. James Caan's, he's an interesting guy because he wants to keep to himself. And what he says about not wanting to date this girl, he says, "You see my shirt? It's new. I like things that are new. I don't want to date somebody that's been used." And you're like, "Oh, shit." Just kind of stuff like that. I think there's a lot of more like drama, politics in here and stuff going back and forth than racing. The racing stuff is fine. Never did I think any of the major characters were in danger. The plot and the script are kind of predictable in a lot of aspects. The one thing that I felt was very dated for this movie, and of course, dated is going to be here and there. Now, dated, they're all dated. All movies are dated, right, when they come out. Sometimes it hurts the film. Sometimes it helps the film. Sometimes it does absolutely nothing to the film, This time I thought there was one scene in particular that was very dated, besides, the gender politics and stuff like that, but it is what it is. The one scene in here was when they performed the song in this, and the girl singing, and it's just this really corny song about racing, and the backup singers and everybody smiling and doing that, and honestly, it was cringe. It was really hokey, and that's, it's so funny when you look at 60s cinema, right? You're like, this is the birth of the nihilism that we all know and love for the 70s. Like, you got Bonnie and Clyde in 67, Night of the Living Dead in 68, The Wild Bunch in 69, but there's this huge chunk of the 60s. You have Hammer Horror going strong, but there's a big chunk of the 60s that is just like carryover from a lot of the 50s stuff, which is really hokey. Well, not all the 50s stuff is hokey, but there is a carryover in the 50s, like mixing that hokey, good-natured spirit with kind of the hippy-dippy shit, and you're just like, this is very awkward, this is very strange, and I don't know how much I like it. There was times when I was like, that is just awkward and weird, but for the most part, I think that Redline 7000 was worth watching. It's a Howard Hawks movie with James Caan and Mariana Hill, and there's racing and stuff like that, and I'm sure it was probably some inspiration to a lot of people that would come before, or later. Like Frankenheimer, all sorts of things like that. But I don't think, like, when you look at the direction of like something that Frankenheimer does, you're like, it's like amazingly out of this world in comparison to the action. But obviously the time and things like that. So as far as the special features are concerned, we have, sorry about that, audio commentary by Julie Kurgo and Nick Redman. Nick Redman since passed, R.I.P. This is probably one taken from the Twilight Time release, if there was one. Bruce Kessler, Man in Motion, a new interview with assistant director Bruce Kessler. Is Nick Redman the one who passed away? I believe he did. Gas, Gears, Girls, Guys, and Death, a new visual essay by filmmaker and critic Howard S. Berger. That's pretty good stuff. Modern Type of Woman, a new video essay by Hawksian Woman, and Redline 7000 by film scholar Kat Ellinger. That's cool because she talks about like the gender politics and how women come across really well in his films, but it was all not to push a feminist agenda because it's Howard Hawks in the time and all that kind of stuff like that. Image gallery, lobby cards, all that stuff. So, yeah, if Redline 7000 sounds like it's up your alley, it is from Arrow Films. Okay, the next one is from Eureka Films, and this is The Double Crossers. This is a Golden Harvest flick. I'm going to be relatively quick with this one, 1976 movie. So, what happens in the very beginning of this film, we have this kind of, this older man, and he's murdered pretty brutally. They throw a knife in his hand, and his son shows up. He's kind of confused at what happened, and his father had left him a note, and he basically, or a tape, I can't remember which, he learns that his father was involved with smuggling with another partner, and his one partner is still like kind of separated, but a decent guy, and the other guy went completely dirty, and his old partner was trying to blackmail him, so he murdered him and whatnot. The son is completely irate. He's a police officer. He quits on the force. They tell him, you don't have to do this, and he says, I don't care. He's going after this bad guy. He's going to go give him everything he's got to take this guy down. The bad guy's got a group of goons, one of which is kind of his main goon, is with him the entire movie. Towards the end of the film, which I think is probably the most fun stuff, he calls in like a couple really ridiculous goons, one of which is played by Sammo Hung, and he's just like in these sunglasses, these glasses, he has this hat, and he's just like dressed silly. It's absolutely completely 70s ridiculous, but a lot of the movie is him trying to get revenge and plant these things and fighting them. Now the main bad guy has like a bad heart, so that plays into here. There's a lot of double crossing. Obviously the double crossing crossers. So that's going to play in here. The bad guys can't trust each other, and he starts to kind of trick them, infiltrate it, turn them against each other until, there's a big showdown at the end, which looks like it's at a fucking golf course. That stuff is good. I like the end fight scene, and seeing Sammo Hung was worth the price of admission. He's not a main part in here, but also the one bad guy is memorable. These movies, a lot of these Hong Kong movies from this time are riddled with like a handful of these actors, like character actors and whatnot, that you just recognize, but they're not like the big stars as some of the other ones. But you do know who they are, and they only have this set amount of actors that they use in this, and like Italy and stuff. There's only so many actors to go around to be in these movies that know any fragment of martial arts, so they're all going to be in it. This one was a little meandering, and it was kind of jumping to places here and there where I was just kind of losing the story, where I was like, I'm not really invested in this entire story until we start to get to that end climax. And I know the characters, I know that they're betraying each other and all that stuff, or the one guy's a little slimy at the end, but the best stuff is the action in here, and it gets the best when you see Sammo Hung, because that's the guy I'm in it for. That's what I'm invested for, that character actor who's in the back. It's not a big role here. Might have been doing a favor for somebody. But as far as the double crossers is concerned, it looks really good. It sounds good. You can watch it in 2 languages. So you have we do have the classic original Cantonese and English dub, which is awesome. Newly translated for this release. Subtitles, of course, brand new. Audio commentary by East Asian film expert Frank Jin, New York Asian Film Festival. Brand new audio commentary by action cinema expert Mike Lander and Artie Vinema. And a reversible sleeve featuring original artwork. Yeah, so this is it's a nice release. This movie I wasn't too familiar with, hadn't heard that much about. I do like the relationship between the main guy and his friend. Also, a cop gets involved, and if you watch it in English, like, he's not saying the same thing at all when you read the subtitles. It's a really bizarre ending to it, and I was just like, what? What's going on? Obviously, there's some hyperbole in his speech at the very end. Overall, a fun movie that takes place over a couple different locations, but not the best Golden Harvest or the best, Hong Kong action martial arts film, but that's really hard to do. That's a high standard, but it's still entertaining enough. Okay, these next 2 are pretty wild films. This is from Synapse right here, and this is Intensely Independent, the micro-budget films of Blake Eckard. And there's 2 films on here, Bubba Moonface, and the second one is Coyotes, Kill for Fun. So pretty wild titles here. I guess we're going to start with Bubba Moonface. We'll just do these together. So Bubba Moonface is from 2011. These are very low-budget films, so like as in the budget constraints do show, he uses a lot of the same actors. Seems like a really interesting guy. I believe the director was from Missouri and traveled to, the West Coast, like northern, like Oregon kind of area, if that's my understanding from the special feature on here. There's no commentaries. Is there a commentaries? Maybe, possibly. There's just an interview with this other filmmaker. But the first one, Bubba Moonface. Like, on the back here it says, this is not a feel-good movie. It's even not a feel-okay, but it's probably a feel-awful film. And I would not disagree with that. That's from Film Threat there. Yeah. This movie is just really sad. And you see so many movies, this is going to sound weird, where like everybody is like, we're trying to portray this like rural area where it's like run down and nobody has money and everybody's living in kind of like scholar, and all that kind of shit like that. And it's always over the top. It's like you go down to a rural area in movies, it's like, yeehaw, everybody's got one tooth and they're just highly aggressive, like mountain rapists or hillbillies or something like that, And this one, I think, has a lot more nuance in it. Now, I'm not saying it's like the masterpiece movie or anything. It's just a really dark, depressing drama with like a lot of dark things happening in it. So what happens is we have this guy who's traveled all the way to basically bury their mother, and he meets his brother, and he says, listen, I have no more money. He's just a shell. He's the only way I could describe him as a shell of a person. And he's talking to his brother, and they have like a history of this town and know everybody in here. And he had this thing with this very young girl at one point, really disturbing stuff. And it seems real, like the conversations. It seems that's the kind of stuff that people do. Nothing is ever clear-cut black and white in this world. It's very gray. And that's where I think a lot of the realism comes into this director's world. So what happens in here, of course, is, the father shows up as well. And he shows up with a young woman. Is this my new wife? And the father has bad blood. The kind of brother who lives in this house, all he has is this house. He built this house. He seems to be the only one that ever did anything with his life or tried. And at the same time, another woman shows up and says, this is my kid that this is your kid. And she's pregnant. So he's stuck there now with his father showing up, his brother, and this woman who's claiming this baby's his, and he's just kind of stuck in this place. We follow actually the brother who shows up, the main guy whose house, not the guy's house it is. We don't really follow him. We're more following this brother, who seems to just be completely lost. And there's a lot of dark stuff that happens as he goes into like town and starts to talk to that girl and stuff. I don't want to spoil absolutely everything, but there's a scene where this person tries to fight him, and somebody breaks it up and ends up fighting him, and the camera stays on him, and he's just kind of drinking his beer, almost just completely unaffected by everything that's happening, not intercepting, not trying to break it up. He just doesn't care. Like I said, he's a shell. He's just somebody that almost seemingly has given up and just lets things happen, and he's just wandering. He's almost like, and by the end of it, you expect him to do what he does. It's just only people can take so much or live so poorly. But this one's good. It's pretty crazy, pretty depressing, and there's a couple things in there that make you squirm uncomfortably. You know, I would say that, is it in the same world as something like Family Portraits, or something that, who's the director who, he's always making those really messed up movies. I think it's the guy who made Family Portraits. Yeah, something like that, or Morris County, something along those lines, where it's just like, it's such a dark, nasty drama that, is it horror? I don't know. I wouldn't say this is, but it's going to appeal to horror fans. That's Bubba Moonface. The other one on here is Coyotes Don't Kill for Fun, or is it Coyotes Kill? Coyotes Kill for Fun. This one is a little bit, I think, more complex in the story. I think it's, I don't want to say the other one's like meandering, and I don't mean meandering as an insult on that movie. It's kind of going at its own pace and everything like that. This one, it opens up with this character who's just blood. He gets out of a car. Obviously, you don't know what happened. Did he escape from somewhere? Did he kill this person? Did he steal this car? And he's just kind of, he mutters to himself, I don't kill for fun, or something along the Coyotes line and whatnot. And he kind of wanders through, and he seems to be going somewhere. We're also introduced to some other characters. This woman who has a kid, has a couple kids. She works as a mechanic at a mechanic's office. A mechanic, of course, and the babysitter of the kids, who is kind of having this narration throughout the film, talking about a lot of things and whatnot. Kind of adds like an element to it as well. But what happens is this woman with the kids has a very abusive husband, who's actually played by the same guy who was in the very beginning. Two different characters are playing brothers, two different, same actor, two different kind of characters. And what happens is she starts to kind of use a sex appeal on this mechanic to get him to do something for her, and it gets really messed up and really dark. And some people are going to show up. Yeah, this is seems real as well. You know, when you hear crimes, you're like, why did this person do this, or why was this person there? One way I can explain this is, if you guys listen to the last podcast on the left, they do the Snowtown murders on there, and they talk about how messed up and complicated and weird shit is. Why is this person this? How's this person related to you? Why were they there? And I just feel like that's really kind of how crime is, or these kind of dirty stories. Nothing is clear cut, and when you try to explain it on paper, it just doesn't come through. It's kind of a hard world to capture the life of, very working class, very working poor, criminal kind of degenerate behavior. And I see it in here on a lot of the characters, and I think it comes across realistic in a weird way, as far as the special features are concerned, we have audio commentary by on Bubba Moonface. We do have a commentary in there. Lost Josh on Eckard, video interview with indie film legend John Josh. And that's interesting because he talks about meeting this guy, acting for him in a movie and everything. They show a clip of it, which again, there's a sense of realism. And I think the director plays a character in that clip as well, at the bar talking about a murder or his granddad finding a body. And I was like, man, this all seems real. It feels like this world is lived in, and it's uncomfortable. It's got a low budget quality to it. Like, the camera looks dark and stuff. I think I would recommend these. I think these are really low budget, but they're competent, and they're dark, and they're uncomfortable as shit. So if you want to feel bad, check these out. Bubba Moonface and Coyotes Kill for Fun. All right, we're gonna hop into those 1982 movies.
I know I'm human. If you were all these things, then you just attack me right now. So some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to. But it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
Son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you? You son of a bitch, you left the bodies and you only moved the headstones! You only moved the headstones! Why? Why?
For a girl like you to come into my life, I've been waiting for a girl like you who love and will survive. I've been waiting someone new to make me feel alive. Yeah, waiting for a girl like you to come into my life.
You bitch! You calling me a bitch!
What's in the basket?
How do we know she is alive?
Please stop it. There's no more time. You've got to... Please stop it. Stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop
All right, the first one up from 1982 is directed by J.S. Cardone, who directed Shadow Zone, which I covered. It's the full moon movie. And I had seen this one before a couple times, actually. This is The Slayer. This made the Video Nasties 1 or 2 list. I don't know why. There's a couple scenes probably that got it on there. But The Slayer is a very bizarre film. And I'm going to say this right now. I've always been a fan of The Slayer. I think The Slayer is a misunderstood, underrated movie. I think that people, when they popped in The Slayer, they were expecting a balls-out slasher from the trailer and the marketing and all this stuff. And what they got was a very supernatural, very, I would say, intelligent, intellectual mind fuck of a movie. The Slayer is a movie that follows 4 characters that are going to stay on this Tybee. Is it Tybee Island? It's like off the coast of Georgia, somewhere around there. I believe it is. It may be mistaken because I know there's a big thing about Tybee Island and whatnot. So made in like the Georgia area on an island deal. And we have artist, her husband, her brother, and his brother's wife, who's a former actress. So these 4 people are pretty tightly knit. They're going to stay at this cabin. They get dropped off in a plane. This is funny because they're isolated, right? It's on an island. Reminds me of Island of Blood, which, of course, is another 1982 kind of slasher movie. Well, not as good as this one, I would say. But so they get on this island, and almost immediately our lead here, Kendall, not Susie Kendall, but another Kendall, she sees this old abandoned like movie theater that people used to play, like put plays on and everything, and it's all run down. She says, I I painted. I know this. I know this is in my dreams. I painted this. And they say that's nonsense. She's on the verge of a mental breakdown. She's very popular an artist, and she changed her thing because she's having these dreams. They get to the house, and she just doesn't seem to be enjoying herself. The brother wants to go fishing, and they're trying to calm her down, but she just got this really awful feeling. She's having premonitions and nightmares and all these things like that. And the first night, I believe she has a nightmare, or earlier in the day, we see kind of this fisherman be brutally murdered, which is bizarre because you don't see the fisherman at all. He just pops in, and then he's murdered, and you're just like, this is so weird. And you see a point of view, so you're thinking there's a slasher on this. I'm going to spoil this movie, okay, because I want to kind of discuss it a little bit more in terms of horror and where it fits in horror. So we see that guy killed, and she has a nightmare later that night. Now, like I said, there's a lot of premonitions and things like that, uneasiness, and her husband dies. He's killed. His head's caught in. It's pretty gory detail. And the next morning they can't find him. She's claiming all these things that she saw in her dreams that she wouldn't know about. The brother is fighting it tooth and nail, but we register that he says she had this problem when she was young. There was something there that happened to her when she was very young about, a kitten given to her. She was given a kitten, and the kitten ended up in a freezer. And you're just like, oh, wow, maybe she's the killer. That kind of idea where you're kind of questioning someone's mental state that you're in an area with, like Columbus or something like that, right? They find her art, and they're like, well, she's got to be the killer as well. What I really find cool about this film is, yeah, you think it's a slasher, but it becomes something much more. It becomes a supernatural aspect. In 1984, 2 years later, Nightmare on Elm Street would have a killer that is super iconic in Freddy Krueger with the glove and the striped sweater and the fedora, all these elements about it, and he kills you in your dreams. So this movie is different in the aspect, right? We have the sender who can manifest things in his dreams or his thoughts out into the real world this year as well. You have the brood, which is psychoplasmics. Your pain, your trauma, your mental trauma can turn out into something and manifest into a real being on the outside. So like I'm seeing these aspects and these weird kind of play in horror, and people would say, Phantasm has that surreal aspect, right, where the nightmares are becoming a reality. And Fulci has that nightmare logic in the late, the early 80s as well with the Beyond and all these things. And premonitions are nothing new. We see the psychic and millions of things like that. Premonitions are one of the oldest horror things ever, right? Just an uneasy feeling. But in The Slayer, what makes this so cool about this is she dreams of a monster. And you don't know if she has the ability to bring these monsters out from her dream and it's just her thinking, or if it is some sort of evil nightmare demon, which is somehow in her consciousness that wants out. But at the very end, you get the shot of the monster. And I think a lot of people are disappointed by this film because they think it's a all balls-out monster film or, a monster movie. There's nothing more disappointing to a monster kid when they rent a horror movie thinking there's going to be a monster and the monster's in it for 5 seconds. I know, I've heard the complaint millions of times. That Primeval movie had that issue. It's like, or they thought it was a slasher and it was a killer crocodile or something like that. That's the opposite. But people are never happy when they think they're getting something. If they're looking for slasher and they get something else, or they're looking for a monster movie and they get something else, right? But it is part of the problem when it came out, the marketing and just the idea of it, right? But the Slayer killer itself is an amazing, cool monster. The kills are great. There's only a handful of them, but they're really amazing, including a head taken off, somebody killed by hooks, somebody stabbed with a pitchfork, from the back, which is brutal. That's probably one of the best pitchfork kills of all time. But the idea is what gets me. She has these nightmares. She's afraid to go to sleep. She's sitting there like, I can't sleep. They give her something to put her to sleep. You're like, that's so Nightmare on Elm Street, right? I wonder if Wes Craven saw this movie and said, I think I can do something different and improve on it, So it's hard to say. But in terms of story, it's weird because this writer-director, when I watched Shadow Zone, I had that idea years ago before I saw Shadow Zone. Shadow Zone was made way before I had that idea, about the idea of having these fears that somehow are turned into a reality. And that is what this director has done. Shadow Zone is such a cool fucking idea that you're like, the one character witnesses, right? He witnesses his childhood boogeyman that attacks him and manifests it. Kind of like It, in a way. But Nightmare on Elm Street's before It, and so is this. So you have that manifestation of something that is in your dreams coming out into reality, which is kind of like, to me at the time, was like a last frontier of horror, right? Because what if it was an endless way to create monsters and weirdness and insanity without, having a real explanation? You can do whatever you want because dreams are endless. That's why Nightmare on Elm Street was such a cool fucking idea, and that's why this is such a cool idea, although it keeps it very, very contained in what it is. While something like Ascender gets a little bit more out there because the stuff is happening, but a little bit contained as well. So like I'm sitting there looking at the idea of this, like, right, this monster coming out of her dreams and attacking, and then it ends in a way that you're like, she's back as a little girl waking up, and it's Christmas morning, and her dad gives her the kitten, and she freaks out. Now, she mentions that she's had this dream forever back at the house. So, in her entire life, has it always been the dream that she's always had, and she's rehaving that dream again? Or is she a young little girl having the premonition of what's to come in the future? It's so bizarre, so weird. I love that stuff in here. It's just a movie that got me thinking. Like, The Thing is another movie. I'm not saying it's as good as The Thing, but The Thing is one that always gets me thinking. Like, did The Thing know he was a thing? How did it assimilate this? How does it assimilate that? When did this person get assimilated? It's so... horror movies that keep me thinking, too. Same thing with a lot of Romero movies. I'm like, well, this and that, and this protect... I like that as I get older, you know? And The Slayer is one of those. And I know a lot of people are entertainment value. It's not. I think it is good. I think the music's good. I think it's creepy. I think it's well done. There's some nudity in here if that's what you're looking for. There's some decent kills. There's some good characters. It's acted fairly well. I like The Slayer quite a bit. As far as the special features are concerned, we have optional English subtitles for deaf and hard of hearing, audio commentary with writer-director J.S. Cardone, actress Carol Cottonbrook, and executive in charge of production Eric Weston, moderated by Evan Cant, or Ian. Evan. No, it's Ewan. Audio commentary with Hysteria Continues, isolated score selections, and audio commentary with composer Robert Folk. Nightmare Island, The Making of the Slayer, documentary featuring interviews with J.S. Cardone, Carol Cottonberg, Eric Weston, producer William Ewing, director of photography Karen Grossman, camera operator second unit DOP still photographer Arlij Naki, special creature makeup effects artist Robert Short, and Slayer performer Carl Keynes. And that's 52 minutes long, guys. Return to Tybee, the locations of Slayer, featurette revisiting the shooting locations of Tybee Island, Georgia. Tybee Post Theater Experience, join the audience at Tybee Post Theater on one of the film's key locations for the very special hometown screening of the Slayer. Includes event introduction, feature-length audience reaction track, and post-screening Q&A with Arlij Armanaki and Ewan Cant. Still Gallery original theatrical trailer. I like this one. Blu-ray and DVD in the Arrow release. Pick up The Slayer if you haven't seen it. Unjustly hated film. I don't think it's hated, but unjustly it's underrated, I would say. You know, and I think this probably make my top 25 of 1982. It's a good safe bet. Maybe not top 10, top 25 most likely. Okay, the next one here is Julie Darling. This is the Code Red Blu-ray, and this stars Sybil Danning, Anthony Francisca, I never say his name right, Francisca, and Isabel Mejas. And now Anthony, of course, did Tenebrae the same year. Great. Peter, what's his name in it? Peter something. Great performance in Tenebrae, and he's solid in this. But Julie Darling is a movie that I had heard about for a very long time. This is very 82, very much a product of the time. So we have a girl in Julie Darling. Her father it's not Darling, but he's called her Julie Darling. That's how he talks in the movies. He's kind of like a weird William Shatner thing, but he fits so perfect in Tenebrae. So what we have here is this young girl who's obsessed with her father. She's madly in love with her father. Really kind of has a disdain for the mother. She has a pet boa constrictor that she absolutely loves. And there's obviously some tension going on. They want to send her to a boarding school, and she doesn't want to go. So there is this handyman that hangs around the house. He was paid to get rid of the snake. He's just a real creep. I don't really know his necessarily a job to get rid of stuff, but he's just a piece of shit. Horrible 80s stereotypical like crook rapist guy. So the mom kind of flirts with him here and there seemingly, or he seemingly thinks so. And what happens is the father's out of town. This guy shows up and he tries to, hey, come sleep with me. Let's have sex. And she turns him down. Julie Darling, being upset at her mother, witnesses this attempted rape. She goes to get her gun, and she has it pointed. She could take the shot, but she realizes if the mother out of the picture, she'll have her father all to herself. What happens is the mother dies. They see each other. She lets it go. We even have a lineup at one point because we have this side plot where we follow this character down and we realize he's just impotent unless he's trying to rape or hurt somebody, because there's this whole scene with a prostitute and everything like that, and he goes to a lineup and she lets him go. Now, Julie Darling thinks she's going to have her father all to himself, but that's not the case. Sybil Danning is his girlfriend on the side, and she has a he has a daughter. She has a daughter, son. She has a son, and they move in fairly quickly together. So Julie Darling starts to target Sybil Danning from legendary movies Battle Beyond the Stars, The Howling 2, a bunch of other stuff. Red Queen Kills 7. Is she in that, or is she in the Night Evelyn Possession? She's in one of those ones. I can't. The Emilio Mergliati movies, Mergliagi movies. I can't remember which one. I just remember Sybil Danning popping in one of those and being like, wow, that's crazy. But so what happens is we kind of pit Sybil Danning against Julie Darling in this movie. And we kind of see this right away. We see like a chess scene where they're playing chess, and Julie Darling gets the best, and she's like, I see. And we're like, yeah, that's a visual representation. What the fuck is about to happen between these two? It's a nice little touch. But yeah, it gets complicated when Julie Darling starts to blackmail certain parties into doing what she wants. But can never really trust a crazy rapist, now can ya? But yeah, overall, this movie is pretty dark, pretty weird, has some crazy incestuous stuff in here that I think is a little insane. But overall, Julie Darling's a pretty solid kind of 80s thriller. I think it bends into the horror category a little bit, but I wouldn't go out as far and say it's an all-out horror film. But yeah, we have an audio commentary with star Sybil Danning, moderated by David Duchovny. Audio commentary with star Isabel Mejes. On-camera interview with Sybil Danning. On-camera interview with Isabel Majas. Code Red trailers. Yeah, so this is on 4K, but it's going out of print from Dark Force. I actually enjoyed the Sybil Danning interview and with one with Mejas. Mihas possibly, but Sybil Danning is pretty upfront. She's like, it's a popular movie, people seem to like it. I have a popular audience among the males and the females and the gay audience and all this kind of stuff like that. Sybil Danning, she's pretty intelligent when it comes to her audience and everything like that. And Julie Darling, sleazy, kind of trashy, creepy, incestuous movie from 1982. All right, the next one here is Midnight, directed by John Russo from 1982. This is a 7 release. You're on your own. You're all alone. The music in Midnight is awesome. Yeah, so this one I've covered a couple times. I feel like I used to have a VHS of Midnight. I doubt I still have it. That's one of those things I wish I still had. You get rid of a lot of stuff when you upgrade and everything like that. So, John Russo from, the George Romero group back in the day, and all those people like that. So this has John Amplas in it. It also has, of course, Lawrence Tierney, who had a nice little horror trajectory in the early 80s, late 70s. He did Blood Rage, the Joe Zito movie in 1980, and then 1981 he did The Prowler. 1982 he does Midnight. Later on he'll do Silver Bullet in 85 and whatnot. So Lawrence Tierney has this little horror kind of cred in there from being like an old Hollywood actor ending up in all these like trashy kind of horror films in the early 80s. But Midnight is based off a book by John Russo as well. This is kind of a low budget film here, and I don't know if the original VHS or DVD even had like the opening film here, the opening scene here where we have the kind of the cult. It's very if you will, a Texas Chainsaw kind of Massacre thing, but it has that satanic panic element as well, in that Pittsburgh kind of Pennsylvania feel too, with like the rural area a little bit, like the trees and everything, small town kind of mentality at times. So visually, aesthetically, all that kind of stuff, the time, I love it. Love the music. So like Midnight is probably just in a mood piece for me. I really enjoy it. That's so weird that I saying that kind of stuff, but that's just the way I feel about Midnight. So what happens is in the very beginning we have this cult. They're very young, and it reminds me of Frailty, actually. The mother is with her 4 kids, and there's a girl trapped in a bear trap, and they're like, kill her. And she's like, it looks like so-and-so's sister. I can't. It's like, they can take any form. They're demons. And it's so weird that they say they're demons and they want to kill them, but they're the Satanists. So it's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on with their mind state. But trying to, dissect what the hell a fucking crazy family is thinking is impossible. The human mind is, fucked up sometimes. So what happens is we kind of fast forward to modern day, and we have this young girl. We have a couple guys who are traveling cross country. They're going to kind of go all the way to Florida from where they're going. And there's this young girl who, her stepfather's Lawrence Tierney. He's a cop. He's an alcoholic. He comes home one night and tries to molest her. It's a really fucked up scene. It's like, give your daddy a hug. Give your stepdaddy a hug. It's really creepy because it's Lawrence Tierney. And you're like, man, that's just uncomfortable, It reminds me a little bit of the Rodney Dangerfield Natural Born Killers kind of thing going on. She ends up getting the hell out of there. Hitchhikes, get picked up by these 2 guys. They don't know she's underage. They're driving down. They go through a small town. There's a lot of racism going on through this small town. At the same time, there's that cult still in the backwoods, one played by, John Amplas from Martin and some other Romero films, Day of the Dead, and they're killing people. and they need a certain amount of people for, Easter Sunday or something along that. There's a holiday that they need these people for. Is it Halloween? But midnight, whatnot, is when they need the sacrifices. So they're killing people in this small town. They need like 3 women. But what's really kind of unique about this one, besides, like I said, like a lot of the rule stuff and on the element, is that Lawrence Tierney, who is a rapist, a molester, whatnot, he is after his daughter, but not for like the way to like shut her up. But there's this really grody scene where he's talking to his wife and he's like, I think that she's trying to experiment sexually rubbing on me, and she might tell you something. And you're just like, oh my god, the scum is trying to get out of this. Of course, the wife doesn't end up believing him, so he's like, I gotta try to make things right. So he ends up driving cross country here, and he's running into the local sheriffs trying to cross state, trying to find her. And the sheriff's like, I wouldn't go in the backwoods. Like, you guys aren't even going to do it. So he's like, there's a lot of people out there that got stills. I wouldn't fuck with them. It's basically, so he's on the way doing police work trying to find his stepdaughter. And at the same time, she's been abducted by this cult. The cult is 4 members. There's Cyrus, who's like this big kind of half-wit kind of character. I guess he'd be the Leatherface. All he does is laugh and chuckle, and he's really, really big, overweight guy. We have Luke and Abraham. John Amplas plays, Abraham. And at one point when you first meet them, there's a really cool idea that they're dressed as cops. So this is a whole big racist cop scene, which is fucked up. Fits obviously into today. Like, is I guess you say is it's more prevalent now than ever. It's just always been prevalent. You know what I mean? The idea that cops are racist or authority figures are bad at times, and they take advantage of the situation. But this time they're just dressed as cops, which is scary as hell too. But then we have the female kind of leading of this group. I feel like she's kind of taken the place of the mother, although they argue she is the matriarch. And there's of course the psycho element, which is turned later into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that element of the dead family member that they still talk to and they still act as alive. It's very Ed Gein-ish, of course, both those movies based on the crimes of Ed Gein. So we have Midnight here. And Lawrence Tierney does end up tracking him down. So it's like this interesting stuff that doesn't quite follow the structure of a slasher or a family like group killer. There's just little bits that are a little bit different where characters get killed, how they get killed. It's fairly gory, but not so amazing special effects. Savini did effects, but he did it as an in-betweener. Barely remembers it from the special features. I must mention that the score is fantastic. The score and the music itself is good, but the actual like theme music in here, you're all alone, you're on your own. Like, I love music like that. If you know me, like, I love the song Soldier Blue. I love Heaven Help Us and The Crazies. Those songs are some of my all-time favorite songs. Those songs that are made in movies like that. You know what I mean? They stick with me. They're like folky kind of songs. Like if you look at what's the one, the Valdez Horses with Charles Bronson has a great little song like that as well. Midnight has one of those, and the score reminds me a bit of Truth or Dare, the Tim Ritter movie, how we got like that like religious choir to do that. But of course that one has like an element of so ridiculous at times. It's a critical madness, and it's so crazy and bombastic that you can't help but laugh. And I truly believe the Midnight score, the song in here, is just really good, and it fits the movie perfectly, and I would really recommend it. So like there is some special features on here with that guy as well. So let me get into special features. Love the slipcover here with Lawrence Tierney on there and the cult and everything like that. Satanic panic shit, man. As far as the special features, we have Making Midnight interview with John Russo. That's pretty cool. He talks about how the movie got made, the budget, and all that kind of stuff. Producing Midnight interview with Samuel M. Sherman, who produced lots of stuff, including Raiders of the Living Dead, right? Which also has a really cool song in it. If you guys remember Raiders of the Living Dead. The living dead are after me. We're going to turn this to really bad karaoke hour with Mrparka. Then we have the Midnight Killer interview with John Amplas, classic actor, of course. Small Favors interview with special effects makeup artist Tom Savini. Doesn't remember much. He's like, that must have been an in-betweener. Isolated score selections featuring an audio interview with composer Mike Mazzi. And that was my favorite, because he's talking about, at first we didn't really want to do this. We're kind of religious guys. We didn't really want to make this satanic horror film. But he is so self-aware. There's nothing more annoying to me when you have delusional people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, or just have been like brainwashed to the fact that they don't know what they are or what the movie they're talking about. And this guy, he's just sitting there and he's like, yeah, it was a part of its time. I'm happy that it had the regional quality, had the 80s quality. People seem to like that. We talked about how we got the music, how we did this, and it's just like, yeah, this dude is smart. This dude knows exactly what this is and exactly his part in it. And I thought that was really good information to have. That's stuff that you don't always hear interviews from that stuff. Like, it's good to get some fresh voices in there, of course. And I believe that the guy who Michael Felsher, I think, was the moderator on that and did a lot of good work on the special features on here, if I'm not wrong, because I remember hearing his voice and everything like that. So yeah, Midnight. I like this one, and the more I watch it, the more I like it. There was a sequel by Tempe, Midnight 2, Sex, Death, and Videotape. And as big a Tempe fan as I am, I've never watched Midnight 2, which is really crazy. I think Russo might have directed it himself. Alright, next up is the most bizarre movie of 1982 that I'll be covering, and this is Liquid Sky. Yeah, this is a crazy movie. I don't even know how to go about this one, so let's just jump right into it. So, Liquid Sky, this is a Vinegar Syndrome release. Hear my knees popping, I'm getting old. And this is a cult movie that I had heard about for years. Yeah, how do we go about this? So, this is a New York movie during the punk scene, big time in that aspect. And it's made by Eastern European Russian director. And if anybody's ever seen any of these like 70s or 80s like Eastern European or Russian science fiction kind of horror movies, because they all have like a bend of science fiction to them, they are fucking weird and they're their own animal. There's nothing quite like a Russian science fiction movie, especially from that time. And I've seen a couple going through the 80s stuff, and they're their own animal. They have a unique quality to them that's kind of unmatched. And of course, if you look at 1980s New York, it's got a gritty, weird quality. Then you add the punk rock aesthetic, and you mix all that in a weird, surreal kind of quality. And that's why Liquid Sky is probably the only movie that's quite like this. And I'm not saying it's like the greatest thing ever. It is a weird film, unique film. Definitely a cult item. Definitely worth watching. Definitely interesting. So aliens are coming to New York. They're in a tiny ship. They kind of land in this area, and they kind of are focused on this woman. She actually plays two roles. She's like a model, but she plays a male model as well. This guy named Jimmy, who's just an asshole piece of shit who doesn't like her. And it's just really dark kind of stuff in here. I feel like there's a little bit of Abel Ferrara in here too, which is weird. But it's kind of around this whole like model punk rock scene. So you see them go to concerts, and a lot of these characters around are just like, especially the men. There's a couple women that are just terrible pieces of shit, rapists, drug users, just abusive, horrible people. And throughout the movie, in the very like first act, you see all these people she interacts with. She's raped at one point, and she's like beat up. She's abused emotionally by a girlfriend. All these kind of things like that. And what she soon realizes is that there is an endorphin in your brain when you're having sex, and essentially that it's kicked off by heroin. It's a mixture of that, and she starts to have sex with these people, and almost immediately after they disappear. Boom. And she's like, the first couple, she doesn't realize it until she realizes she has that power, and she's registering there's some sort of alien activity going on, because there's this kind of crazy professor guy who comes in, and he's like, I've been spying on it, I've been looking at it, and he's like also kind of dating this like lady who's like an agent or something like that along the same side of like that she's involved with the scenes, and he's like right by her like apartment. That's where they can see the spaceship, so they start to intermingle, and we have this whole weird element between those two. So what happens is we almost have like, I don't even want to say like a revenge film where she starts sleeping with the people and they just boop disappear. There's like this great scene where there's like in the film set, and she's just like, I bet you'll disappear, yada yada, I bet you won't. And it's just like I don't know how to go about this, but it's visually it's really gorgeous too, because there's a lot of bright colors and neon lights and stuff like that, and the people look really cool, and it's capturing that 80s punk rock aesthetic in New York City, but it's also capturing that weird like Russian science fiction shit. So it's like this amalgamation weird world that you don't think would ever mix, and you're there. I mean, it's the melting pot, United States, but New York has that different. But like, I would have never put these things together, right? And when they do it, you're like, it's a little rough and weird and uncomfortable, but I think it's supposed to be. But overall, Liquid Sky is a strange film. It's a good film. It's a cool film, and it's probably a one-of-a-kind film. As far as the special features are concerned, newly scanned and restored in 4K from 35 original neg, commentary track with Slava Turshikamin, director, and we have an interview with him as well, interview with Anne Carlisle, actress, director's introduction, Liquid Sky Revisited, 2017 50-minute making of doc, Q&A from 2017 Alamo Drafthouse, Yonkers screening with Slava Turkishman, Anne Carlisle, and Clive Smith, co-composer, isolated soundtrack, never before foreseen outtakes, alternate opening, behind-the-scenes rehearsal footage, multiple trailers, still gallery, booklet with essay by Sam Deegan, cover art by Derek Grabowskak, that's not right, reversible cover art, English subtitles, yeah. So this is a crazy movie, almost 2 hours long, worth your time, worth watching at least once. You may love it, you may hate it, but you gotta see it, especially if you like horror, sci-fi, cult, whatever, man. I would recommend it. Okay, guys, the Patreon pick is a wild one. And I can't remember who picked this one, but they picked fucking Porky's. That's right, Bob Clark movie, early 80s, sex comedy. Now, Porky's is one that I had only seen parts of, and it was an infamous movie. It's weird, you think horror films or anything like that. And nowadays, I think that Porky's is more controversial than 90% of the horror movies that have come out in the last 50 years. Sex comedies from the 80s are a very touchy subject. They're their own animal. Everyone's like, oh, it's so misogynistic, racist, homophobic, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they are. They can be, and most certainly they are. I would say that Last American Virgin probably holds up the best out of the ones I've watched. I think that movie has a hard impact, and I think that I think its heart's in the right place. Stuff like Revenge of the Nerds, watching it, you're just like, oh, fuck. Like, there's a lot of funny shit in it, but at the same time, you'd have to take it with its context and all that kind of stuff. It goes without saying, right? It's not appropriate, but there's still some super memorable stuff in here. And Porky's is more in that vein. So this movie takes place in the 50s. People, I think, are forgetting that too. When they talk about Porky's takes place in the 50s. It follows a group of, high schoolers in Florida looking to graduate. There's a young guy that's never had sex, and his friends are, of course, we're going to try to get our buddy laid. That's the whole plot of Porky's. They want to have sex, they want to do pranks, all sorts of weird things. But the whole centerpiece in the movie is this place called Porky's. And the guy who runs Porky's, Porky himself, is the big heavy guy who's in Don't Answer the Phone, who Nicholas Worth goes to. Like, who could out-sleaze Nicholas Worth when he's playing like a strangler rapist? This guy, of course. The guy Porky can do it. And he goes there and he's like trying to sell pictures, and he's like, what are these pictures? He's got a cigar. He's like, these pictures, I can sell these. Like these. And he's just in this as this like what happens is this nightclub in the middle of a fucking Florida swamp backwoods, and the kids want to go there to get, laid, pay for all this kind of stuff, right? But obviously they love fucking with the big city folk, whatnot. So they go there. A lot of shit happens to them. They get beat up. They get dumped in the water, but they're not going to let it slide. They don't want to let it slide. That's kind of like the climax of the movie of Porky's, right? But a lot of it is the absolute weird shenanigans that this group of people do. There's familiar faces in here, some actors that I think everybody would recognize, that pop up in a lot of other ones. And there's like 2 sequels to Porky's as well. Porky's Revenge is the third one. I think just Porky's 2 is this. And it's directed by Bob Clark. Bob Clark is, a very popular director. He's directed from Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Black Christmas, the original from '74, Death Dream, excellent movie, and Baby Geniuses, Christmas Story. The guy's made a lot of movies. He's made fucking Porky's. He has one of the weirdest resumes ever. A lot of cult films in here. Bob Clark knew what the hell was going on. And you can't help but think, Bob Clark is probably writing some of his own high school experiences in here in the 50s and stuff like that. And obviously it's dated. But I would be a liar if I said that some of this wasn't still funny to me. I know it's inappropriate. I know. I'm not like, yeah, that's all. Everybody knows that. But there's some still funny stuff in here, some clever stuff in here. And at a certain point in this movie, there is a message to be learned that I think they do kind of tackle racism in here. And you hear a lot of racist shit said by characters towards African Americans or Jewish people. And the Jewish stuff comes full circle, right? It's kind of like breaking that cycle of racism in there. And I was like, you know what? This is actually a good story within this sex comedy. And you need a good story at times in these sex comedies. You know what I mean? Like, that's what separates comedies a lot of times now. Is it's just like, hey, we got 10 funny guys in a room. Let's just have them all improv. The whole thing is just improv. They shoot 12 hours. They cut it down to an hour and a half, and then or sometimes 2 hours. And you're just like, there's no story here, though. Like, and there is a story in Porky's. Like it or not, there is some arc on characters and everything like that. There's the infamous scene, of course, right, where the guy sticks his dick through the bathroom, which is so fucked up. Like, you're thinking that it's like, these are like sex crimes. Like, that's 80s comedies are just sex crimes, the movie. And of course, one of the teachers, the gym teachers, who everybody knows is Ida from Motel Hell. Of course, she's in here as this, I don't remember what they call her, something horribly incorrect, right? Non-PC, just overweight kind of gym teacher. She grabs his dick, and there is the great scene, the aftermath in there, when the principal's office, right? Where she is trying to convince the principal, when all the other gym teachers, the male gym teachers, are listening, that she needs to inspect the genitalia of all the boys in that class. And you're just thinking, like, oh my God, can you imagine, like, a teacher asking that nowadays, like, she just, let alone grabbing the dick of the kid, like, or let alone somebody sticking their dick into a shower. I mean, this movie is riddled with nudity and all that kind of stuff, and sex and all those kind of things like that. Yeah, but can you just imagine it? It is sleazy, but I think the whole Porky's outline and getting revenge on them is fun. Of course, I can't think of the actor's name who pops up in so many movies. He's in Offspring. He's in, of course, The Brood. He's just a good actor. He's in Black Christmas. Canadian actor. I can't think of him for some. I'm completely skipping my mind. He's a good actor, solid actor, just in a lot of those movies. But he's in here as a cop. But overall, I know I'm not supposed to like it, but hell, I mean, and here's one thing that I will mention, right? So, I grew up with Revenge of the Nerds. I watched that movie 100 fucking times growing up. Loved it. As I hit a certain point, 18, 19, 20, I'm watching it and I was like, man, this kind of fucked up, right? This is really fucked up. Because you're looking at that aspect of the young person. You're like, the nerds are heroes. You're not going to go out and spy on girls or rape girls or anything like that. But you're looking at them as the heroes of the film. That's how they're portrayed. As you get older, you register, man, they're doing some real fucked up shit. But you're looking through it in that nostalgic tinted glasses still because you grew up with it. Porky's I didn't grow up with. So watching it, I was like, it did make me feel better watching it. Like, I'm not feeling bad for watching anything, okay? It's a fucking movie. It's only a movie. But watching it as it takes place in the 50s, you're like, well, you expect those kind of things from a lot of characters. Not the rape, but the racism. You see, yeah, you expect that kind of shit. It's not the director or the writer being like, hey, we're racist. It's, hey, man, in the 50s in Florida, these guys, even the guys that that are main characters, they were fucking racist, unfortunately, So it's kind of a thing to put in there that is realistic, And I think that sometimes movies are afraid to be realistic, and somebody's like, it's Porky's, which a lot of stuff's not realistic, but I'm sure that a lot of people did fucked up shit like this, you know what I mean? Teenagers are horny and weird and gross and commit crimes, especially probably in the 50s. But, Porky's is entertaining. I'm not going to tell you that it's for everybody. I enjoyed it. I heard the sequels aren't quite as good. But I also just like the actor who played Porky. He's just this character actor who's just perfect for that role. And the actual Porky's thing itself is a cool idea that just the set and everything like that. But overall, Porky's. I enjoyed it. It's not for everybody. If you go through watching these movies thinking that that's how you should live your life, then you need real serious help. But yeah. Alright, let's get into these questions, comments, and concerns. So, Ken Coakley, class of 1984 is my second favorite Perry King movie. The Lords of Flatbush is number one. I saw The Lords of Flatbush at a drive-in when I was 7 years old, and when I saw him, I wanted to be him. He also auditioned for the role of Han Solo in Star Wars. There's footage of his screen test. Another movie he co-starred in that I loved was The Choir Boys, which is based on my book by my favorite author, Joseph Wambaugh. How do you say that? Wambaugh? It has a huge cast of actors that would be successful actors throughout the 70s and 80s, including James Woods and Randy Quaid to name a couple, as well as Stephen Mock from the Monster Squad, Nightwing, and Stephen King's Graveyard Shift. Yeah, I have The Choir Boys. It's great, but I have not seen that, but it's a great cast. I have to do the impression Stephen Mock and Graveyard Shift shows over. I love him in that movie. You'll walk on the Graveyard Shift. Class of 1984 was also the first collaboration between Tom Holland and Roddy McDowall before doing Fright Night together, of course. Now regarding Videodrome, which was in your update section. This is one of the long line of great movies that starred James Woods. He was, as I mentioned earlier, in The Choir Boys. And then a couple of years later, starred in The Onion Field, which is also based on the novel by Joseph Wambaugh. Bow. It's probably Bow, right? It's based on a true story about two Los Angeles police detectives who were abducted by two career criminals. The film also stars Ted Danson, John Savage, Franklin Seal, from Southern Comfort, of course, Patricia Pointer, and Ronnie Cox. Then years later, he also did Once Upon a Time in America, Salvador, John Carpenter's Vampires, Bestseller, Cop, Hercules, the list goes on. I didn't know that Videodrome had a 4K release. I'll check it out when I get access to the 4K TV. Yeah, there's also a Criterion 4K and an Arrow 4K, whichever one you get cheaper. But, James Woods is a great actor. He pretty much canceled himself just by saying fucked up shit on Twitter. But that's the way it goes, unfortunately. While you were review of Confessions of a Serial Killer, you compared it to Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Henry is somewhat a sentimental favorite, as I rented it at a local video store the same weekend that I went to see the Night of the Living Dead remake as a theater that was a little far from where I lived. Like Day of the Dead and Reanimator, Night of the Living Dead only played at certain theaters. I also remember how great of a night I had that night. I saw the movie, had a late night dinner, and then went home to watch Henry. I considered it to be Tom Toll's double feature. I had known about Michael Rook before because he was in A Sea of Love with Al Pacino, but Henry is of course a starring role. I actually liked the chemistry between Rooker and Talls. As you mentioned, Henry did have a bit more of a moral compass by attacking Talls' character for trying to get in on with his own sister. Yeah, Henry is one of my top 5 favorite films ever made. Horror films. Henry is in there. Tom Tolles is one of my all-time favorite actors. So is Michael Rooker. The portrayal of Otis in Henry is one of the most fucked up, like, buffoon characters ever. I think he's genius in it. Love him in Night of the Living Dead 1990 as well. Like, you bunch of yo-yos, you lame brains. I actually had some correspondence with Tom Tolles a little bit. Like, he had like somebody that helped him out online, according to this person, and he was super friendly from what I remember. When I brought it back, one of the clerks I was friendly with asked me about it. He asked me if I saw Henry. At the time, Henry Rollins was playing at a local club in South Boston. Then I realized he was talking about the movie. Another reason I liked Henry was that it was different from the other movie about serial killers. I'm not a fan of that subgenre, but I really like this one. Another reason it's sentimental favorite is the fact that I bought a bunch of horror Blu-rays, including this, at Best Buy in October of 2011. They cordoned off a section that went 4 rows long of horror Blu-rays and DVDs that only cost $5 to $7 each. I miss those days. Me too. Yeah, Henry I have a lot of love for. I saw that when I was 12 or 13 years old, and it's been a staple in my watch list for years. I know that movie by heart. Quinn 25. That's such a fucked up movie to know by heart. Two people are like, are you alright? I'm like, no, I'm not alright. But Quinn 25, ready to be informed and entertained. Thank you. Honor Films Media. Confession rocks. Glad to put out the full-on cut compared to the VHS. Thanks, Dave. No, thank you. Stephen Hyde. Well, thanks for this. I have my snacks ready to enjoy this review. Hope you're doing well, Stephen. Way up, dude. You're the man of horror movies. Thank you. Carly Allison. Thanks for the nice words on Emasculator, friend. Love and appreciate you always. Same, back at you. Angela 150. I loved Class of 1984. Me too. Love it. Jesse Diaz. Dave, I don't mean to be to fucking get in your business, but are you still going to be on the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast? I'm probably not. Eventually I'll guest on there, but I'm just not going to be a regular staple of any podcast but my own at this point in my life. You being on those episodes was so refreshing to hear, and it really brought in a cool perspective of horror on that show. I appreciate it. I love those guys, but I just don't have the time or patience to do much of anything anymore. iKid3240. I found Maxine to be an entertaining film. It was a nice tribute to the 80s video nasties. The ending was a bit over the top and ultra cheesy. That was indeed. The Nick Moole from Belgium. I'm so stoked now to check out Maxine for myself. I think it'll be a worthy end to the trilogy, unless Ty West is looking to create a Maxine verse. Love the extra episode. The film can't be half bad if it went from the gent who made The Haunting of Julia. No, he wrote part of The Haunting of Julia, so... Questions. Are you excited for Chuck Russell's reimagining of Witchboard, seeing as he did a good job with the Blob remake? It's so far away from the Blob remake. It's not necessarily... Chuck Russell's a good director, but it was at the time he was making movies were so cool, too. So, I'll give it a spin. Hopefully it's good. I mean, Witchboard is a fun movie. It's been years since I watched it. I love Kevin Tenney's Night of the Demons and some other of his films, but I'll definitely watch it if I hear good things. Would you recommend the original Witchboard? I am familiar with Kevin Tenney's Night of the Demons trilogy, which I liked. He only directed the first one. I think he produced or wrote Sec 2 and 3, but I would recommend Witchboard. It's a fun, goofy 80s horror movie. Keep up the good work, sir, but don't exhaust yourself, Mr. Parker, getting a burnout. I shudder at the very thought. Bro, I'm always burnt out. Jesse Diaz. I know motherfuckers hating Board House. They say it's awful, but I had a good time watching it. Me too. It was fun. Boarding House. It doesn't even do that, but I just exaggerate it. And I remember Brandon from Exploding Heads podcast hated it. He was watching it from a Hidden Gem movie challenge, and it was the last movie on his list. Yeah, I don't think, Boarding House is a Brandon movie at all. It is a bad movie, but it was too fun that I will watch again someday. And Heidi Kit Talk. I avoided watching it for years because of hearing people say it was worse than Sledgehammer. I sat through Sledgehammer 2 times. Too many. Eventually I watched Boarding House and absolutely agree with your comment. It's fantastically fun. I also think it's one of the most aesthetically pleasing SOVs. Yeah, Sledgehammer's not as good as Boarding House. Sledgehammer's not as good as Blood Cult. Sledgehammer is Sledgehammer. But I guess we're gonna get into the update. I would zoom in, but when it's only if I do the whole camera thing, but I think I'm just gonna show you guys. The Barnes and Noble sale always comes around, you're always like, I'm gonna buy a million things, and then you get there and you're like, I gotta grab a couple. So I grabbed Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid by Sam Peckinpah 4K. I love this movie. This has three editions on here. The 50th anniversary. It's almost 2 hours. The original theatrical release, that's an hour and 140. Yeah, hour and 46 minutes, and then we have the final preview cut, which is 2 hours and 2 minutes. So there's all these different editions of this movie. Of course, this movie was taken away from Sam Peckinpah, like a lot of his films were, but this is a good movie, and I look forward to checking it out in 4K. Then we have Peeping Tom on 4K, the Michael Powell movie, classic film, made the same year as Psycho. Now it had to have that in 4K. Then we got the Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead from 88 Films. This is an import. This is a wild fucking movie I watched for 91. A lot of fun. I believe Hong Kong movie. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Evil Clutch, which is a 80s movie that Troma distributed here. I've never seen this one on Blu-ray, so it was not cheap. I probably spent too much, but I'm looking forward to watching Evil Clutch. Hopefully it doesn't get a release next week. I guess. I mean, I don't care, but it is what it is. Yeah, we're out of here. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.